It's been 10 years since that Christmas night, but the memories still haunt me to this day, like a shadow that never leaves my side. Before I tell you what happened, don't forget to leave a like if you enjoy midnight fear stories. My mom died when I was just a little kid. I was only 8 years old. I went into complete shock and couldn't understand that she was really gone. She was everything to me, the warmest hug, the heart of our home, the one person who made every day feel safe. When she died, it felt like my whole world went dark. I grew up way too fast after that. When I was little, I always heard people say Santa Claus could make wishes come true. I never really believed it, but I figured I had nothing to lose. A few days before Christmas, I did something I never told anyone about. I wrote Santa a letter. I only asked for one thing. I wanted my mom back. Even at 8 years old, I knew it was an impossible wish. Deep down, I knew Santa wasn't real, but I missed my mom so much that I was willing to believe anything if it meant seeing her again. On Christmas Eve, I placed the letter on my bedroom windowsill and went to bed. That was the biggest mistake of my life. Sometime during the night, I felt my entire bedroom shaking. My eyes slowly opened. At first, I thought I was dreaming. Then I saw it. A huge shadow stretched across the wall. It kept growing and growing until it took the shape of a tall man. For one brief moment, I actually thought it was Santa. But this wasn't the Santa from children's stories. He was unbelievably tall. His body looked twisted, and his eyes burned like fire. He slowly walked toward my bed. It felt like he already knew exactly what I had wished for. He never said a single word. I was absolutely terrified, but hope was stronger than fear. I honestly believed my wish was about to come true. Then the shadow reached out its hand. A second later, my mom appeared beside my bed. I couldn't believe my eyes. She looked exactly like my mother. And yet, she wasn't. Her skin was pale gray. Her eyes were completely lifeless. She looked more like a corpse than a living person. She didn't smile. She didn't say a word. She just stared at me with cold, empty eyes that sent chills down my spine. But none of that mattered to me. She was back. That's all I cared about. I threw my arms around her as tightly as I could. She never hugged me back. She didn't even react. Her body felt freezing cold, like I was hugging a block of ice. I looked up at her and whispered, "Mom, I can't believe you're really here. I missed you so much." She never answered. She simply nodded very slowly, like a machine following instructions. I spent hours talking to her, telling her everything that had happened while she was gone. She never responded. She just stood beside my bed all night, watching me. The next morning, Mom sat with us at the breakfast table. She stared at the food, but never touched a single bite. I couldn't wait to see my dad's reaction. I was sure he'd be overjoyed to see her again, but he didn't even look at her. He just kept reading the newspaper like nothing had changed. Finally, I couldn't hold it in anymore. "Dad, aren't you happy Mom's back?" He slowly lowered the newspaper and looked at me with a confused expression. "Tamar, what are you talking about?" That's when it hit me. He couldn't see her. No one could. I was the only person who could. As the days went by, Mom started asking me for strange things. One day, she wanted a lock of my hair. Another day, she asked for a piece of my favorite shirt. Then she wanted one of my favorite toys. Every time I gave her something, she seemed a little more alive. The gray color slowly faded from her face. Her movements became more human. But at the same time, there was something horribly wrong with her eyes. a dark glow. Something evil kept growing inside them. One day, I finally asked, "Mom, what are you doing with all this stuff?" She didn't answer. She just smiled. It wasn't a normal smile. It stretched wider and wider until it looked completely unnatural. Every night, she stood beside my bed and whispered in a voice that didn't sound anything like hers, "Soon, very soon, Tamar, we'll be together forever." One night, my dad was working late and wasn't home. Mom walked into my room and said it was time to celebrate her birthday. I was excited. I followed her into the living room. The second I stepped inside, my blood ran cold. Strange symbols had been painted all over the walls. Dozens of candles formed a perfect circle across the floor. Their flames cast moving shadows that almost looked alive, like they were laughing at me. My voice trembled. "Mom, what's all this?" She didn't answer. Instead, she began speaking in a language I had never heard before. The words sounded impossible to understand, almost like they weren't meant for human ears. Liham, Leah, Tassar, Ma, Tamar, Tamar. Then she said my name one more time, Tamar. Suddenly, the air became unbearably heavy. The entire room filled with the disgusting smell of something burning. It was so horrible that I could barely breathe. Then her voice changed. It wasn't my mother's voice anymore. It sounded deep, distorted, almost demonic. I tried to run, but I couldn't move. My legs wouldn't respond. It felt like an invisible force had glued me to the floor. One by one, the candles around the circle burst into brighter flames. Before I knew it, my feet lifted off the ground. My arms were forced upward. I was floating in the air, completely helpless. I couldn't move. I couldn't scream. I honestly thought I was about to die. Then, right in front of my eyes, my mother began to change. Her body twisted, her face stretched into something impossible. Her skin darkened, her eyes burst into flames. Whatever was standing in front of me wasn't human. "Please, stop. I don't want my mom back anymore." I cried as loudly as I could. It didn't care. It just laughed. A slow, cruel, inhuman laugh that echoed through the entire house. That's when I finally understood the truth. This was never my mother. It was something else, something evil, something that had answered my wish, pretending to be her. At that moment, I truly believed my life was over. Then the front door exploded open. My dad came rushing inside. The look on his face told me he couldn't understand what he was seeing, but he knew something was terribly wrong. Without hesitating, he ran straight toward me. He grabbed me with one arm and shouted at the creature, "Stay away from my son, you monster!" The creature let out a deafening scream. Its body twisted violently, as if something had weakened it. That was all my dad needed. He pulled me out of the circle and dragged me toward the front door. We ran out of that house as fast as we could. Neither of us looked back. That was the last night we ever lived there. We never returned. A few days later, my dad went back one final time to collect a few of our belongings. The house was completely empty. The strange symbols were gone. The candles had disappeared. There wasn't a single sign that the creature had ever been there. But one thing remained, that horrible smell. The same sickening smell of something burning still lingered inside the house. From that day on, I never celebrated Christmas again, and I stopped believing that anyone could grant wishes, because if something out there really can, it isn't good. Sometimes the things we wish for are better left lost forever.